under the leadership and mentorship of the late and great Kwame Nkrumah. The big debate that was in the chamber was whether we needed separate individual African states or we needed a unified Africa. I remember, Honorable Speaker, when I was in government, spending some hours with the late President Robert Mugabe. He was in Ghana at the time, and he was invited as a guest to listen to the conflicting debates amongst the luminaries. There was one luminary, there was one camp led by President Nkrumah, and another led by President, the late and great Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, which argued that we should remain as separate countries, and another which said that we needed to form one country. My respectful submission, Mr. Speaker, says that we can't continue perpetuating the vestiges of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and remain little splintered countries despite our huge population of over 1 billion. To give actualization to the dream of Pan-Africanism, Mr. Speaker said, we need to break the artificial boundaries that were created in Berlin by Otto von Bismarck and others in 1884 when they created these artificial boundaries. That will then give power to the Pan-African Parliament. At the present moment, it is a talk shop because it doesn't have any policy or legislative power-making authority. It does not make anything that is binding on the nation state. And the simple and good reason, Mr. Speaker, says that African elites and African leaders have refused to let go of their national authority. I submit, Mr. Speaker, that we should move for regional total African integration, destruction of those borders, destruction of the nation state in Africa as we know it today. And this agenda is urgent for 3 reasons, Mr. Speaker said. One of them is the implosion of conflict on the African continent. As I'm talking to you right now, the biggest war is raging in northern Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian government is at war with the citizens of Tigray, and thousands of people are being displaced across the region. Only last week, more than 24 people, Ethiopian citizens, were found dead in Zambia. Previously, it was in Malawi because of the offshoot of the civil war that is raging in Ethiopia. There is a conflict in the Horn of Africa, Mr. Speaker said. There's a conflict in Somalia. Yes, sir. I'm connected. It's muted automatically. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a conflict in the Horn of Africa. Eritrea is unstable. Somaliland, Mogadishu is caught up with the terrorism. There's conflict in Somaliland, Mr. Speaker said, which is trying to become an independent state. There's conflict, vicious conflict in southern Sudan. Sometimes the peace holds, sometimes the peace doesn't hold. There's a conflict in Sudan itself, which has moved from a military dictatorship under Bashir to a people's revolution, back to the military again. There are coups on the African continent. We've seen a coup in Benin, we've seen a coup in Mali, we've seen a coup in Burkina Faso. There is civil disturbance in Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Speaker said. There's a conflict in Cameroon where English-speaking citizens and French-speaking citizens are against the leadership of President Paul Biya, who is the second longest-serving president in Africa after the president of Equatorial Guinea, who just won an election by 93% a few months ago. There is a conflict in Central Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, particularly in Eastern DRC. And Eastern DRC, Mr. Speaker, illustrates my point of these artificial boundaries. Eastern DRC They speak the same language between those that are found in Rwanda. So Rwanda, the city is called Goma. In the DRC, it's called Gisenyi. But it's one city separated by a river. If you go to, so the conflict is taking place amongst people who speak the same language. If you go to Rwanda, there is underlying conflict between the Hutu and the Tutsis. There are people who speak the same language. If you go to Burundi, underlying conflict between people who speak the same language, Kinyarwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis. If you go to the Central African Republic, there's nothing Republican about the Central African Republic. It's a state permanently in conflict since the days of Emperor Jean-Bertrand Bokassa. If you go to Togo, same conflict, Mr. Speaker. If you come into our region, there's a conflict in the Democratic Republic of Mozambique arising out of terrorism in northern Mozambique. So the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, Mr. Speaker, is battling under the scourge of war, civil war, or coups, which means, Mr. Speaker, we must empower the continental bodies, the African Union and the African Parliament. But this can only be done if we discard our national little flags and national anthems which were imposed by Bismarck and others in Berlin in 1884. The second reason, Mr. Speaker, is economics. We have a population of more than 1 billion. By 2045, this population will double. But we are not reaping the economies of scale that come out of a huge population. We have the same population as China, but China is reaping the economies of scale that comes out of a huge population. The scientists call it the demographic dividend, because we are not integrated. So I submit, Mr. Chairman, that we need to form a customs union.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. No, not Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Mr. I downgraded you. Thousands of apologies, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I submit that the idea of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which was signed by African heads of state in March of 2021, must be actualized so that it becomes a full-bodied customs union. We remove trade barriers, we remove passports, we remove borders, but that also must apply to the political borders. So we need regional integration, proper regional integration, so that we can harvest the demographic dividend, so that we can harvest the huge population of a billion people. Zimbabwe has got an effective market of less than 2 million. There are less than 500,000 people who can, with actual domestic demand, aggregate demand, that can support an economy. If we were to integrate a SADC alone, Zimbabwe would suddenly have a market of 300,000. If we were to integrate on the African continent, that's a market of a billion people. Think of what benefit our farmers would derive. Think of what benefit our miners would derive. Think of what benefit our manufacturers would derive. 65% of our economy is informalized, and I'm referring to the recent World Bank note produced in September of 2022. That informal sector, I want to give an example of Glenview. If you go to Glenview, Mr. Speaker, you will find the latest couch being made under the tree in Glenview. Can you imagine if those people had the market in Mozambique, had the market in Burundi, had the market in Kisangani, Zaire, had the market in Mogadishu, had the market in Zanzibar? It would transform this economy. So the issue of establishing one free Africa should be seen from as the ultimate developmental agenda, as the ultimate transformational agenda. My good friend, Mr. Soda Jemu, the esteemed Minister of Energy, the Honorable Jemu, is struggling. Zimbabwe has got installed capacity of energy of 2,000 megawatts, but at any given time, less than 600 megawatts are being produced. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, on the Congo River, there is the Inga, a gorge which is capable of producing 40,000 megawatts of energy, enough to light the whole of Africa and export to Southern Europe, to Spain, which lost the World Cup, and Portugal, which lost the World Cup, and Italy, which never made it to the World Cup. Just the Inga alone, Mr. Speaker. And so it pains me that the World Bank and others have not provided finance to Inga, because they know the liberation effect that Inga will have on the ordinary Wananchi on the African continent, Mr. Speaker. So we have lost 40 decades of independence, 50 decades of independence, pretending to run countries when we are running little tin pot countries. Mr. Speaker, I would rather own 10% of an elephant than 100% of a rat. Our small countries are little rats. Let's come and form this giant called Africa. It pains me, Mr. Speaker, say, if you want to go to Francophone Africa in particular, if I want to go to Tunisia, I have to go to Charles de Gaulle airport first and then come down. There is no direct flight. I will not find a direct flight from here to Mali, from here to Dakar, Senegal, from here to Togo, because of the old colonial infrastructure. Even here in sub-Saharan Africa, here in Southern Africa, it will cost me $800 to Cape Town. But I can buy a ticket to London for $400 because of the colonial vestiges, Mr. Speaker. I submit, Mr. Speaker, look at all my learned friends, they're putting on ties. They can't put on an African dress like myself because the colonization is in the mindset. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, including yourself. The only exception is my father-in-law, Honorable Tepa. So even our dress, Mr. Speaker, we ought to have our own dress. Even our language, Mr. Speaker, we ought to be pontificating in isiZulu, in Kiswahili, Mr. Speaker. We are not able to do that. So yes, we support this motion, Mr. Speaker, but it must raise deeper issues about our omissions as a generation that has failed to unite Africa and to bring Africa together. I thank you very much.
Well done. A good debate.